Hey everyone, today I'm back in Lost Ark to talk about the newly added Kakul-Saydon Legion raid. This is a raid that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. As you know, I quite enjoy the raids of Lost Ark, so having another one is always welcome, but different from the others is that this is a 4-player raid, and I prefer playing with a smaller group of people. Sure, 8 players is fine and there'll be some fun banter on voice chat, but I prefer it when there's a smaller group. Also makes scheduling a lot easier, and if you're going to pug it, then you also only need to find 3 others instead of 7. So I just like it that it's a 4-player raid instead of 8. On top of all that, the 3 gates also have mini games that you'll be playing, which I was also looking forward to a fair bit, as some of them did look pretty fun. So I've cleared the raid 4 times now. What was my experience and what are my first impressions? In terms of the prog experience, it was kinda bad. Gate 1 and 2 were pretty chill, but both groups that I did it with struggled quite a bit on Gate 3. To put it in perspective, and this might be a bit hard to follow, but bear with me. So I raided with 2 groups. Now for group 1, I first cleared gate 1 and 2 before we had to stop because someone had to go to work. Once they were done, I joined up with group 2 to clear with my other character. So group 1 took around 4 to 5 hours to clear gate 1 and 2, and group 2 took about an hour to clear both. And then after we cleared both gates 1 and 2, I then went on to clear gate 3 with group 2, which took around 6 to 7 hours, I wanna say. And after that was done, I went back to group 1 to then also clear gate 3 with them, and that took us around 12 to 15 hours or something like that. So in total, group 1 took around 20 or so hours to clear the whole raid, and group 2 took around 7 hours. So as you can see, gate 3 was quite the difficulty step up compared to the other 2 gates for both of the groups that I did it with. And I think the big reason for that is because there are a lot more one-shot mechanics, and having one dead party member is pretty much going to result in a wipe, as you need all of your players alive to do the mechanics. Maybe you can get away with 3 players alive, but then you gotta get really lucky for that. However, yesterday I did my re-clear with both of the groups, and both took just under 2 hours on the re-clear for the entire raid, which was really great to see, and I'm sure that it'll only get faster from here on out as we get more clears under our belt. So, let's then take it one gate at a time. Gate 1 is mostly an introduction to the raid, I feel like. Gets you familiar with how the madness gauge works, which I think is the actual name for it. We just ended up calling it the clown gauge because it turns you into a clown once it fills up. And then it also shows you a lot of the normal patterns that you'll be seeing again in gate 3. But in gate 3 they have a little extra added to them. There are of course some unique patterns that you'll only be seeing in gate 1 as to still set it apart from gate 3, and then there's also the card on top of all of the players' heads, which you'll also be having some small interactions with here and there. The minigame that happens in gate 1 is definitely the funniest one, but I also think it's the most boring one compared to what comes next. But overall, I think it's a good introduction to the raid because it gets you used to the new style of mechanics. In Valden and Vicus, you're mainly dealing with bigger attacks, for the lack of a better word. Once the boss starts doing a pattern, big or small, once you identify the attack, you know exactly where to go to dodge it. Sometimes you might have to spend an extra second waiting to see where this safe spot is going to be exactly, but usually it's fairly clear where to go. With clowns so far that hasn't really been the case. There seems to be a lot more randomness to the attacks, and there's also a lot more clutter on the screen, especially in gate 3. Maybe part of this is due to the inexperience, and once I get more clears, I'll be able to find the patterns in the attacks more easily, but maybe it's just random and you need to look out for where things are spawning or how things are flying through the arena and then dodge accordingly. It's certainly a new style of fight, so it's something that I'll have to get used to. Gate 2 is probably my favorite one in the whole raid. You're fighting both bosses separately in this one, and the arena also has an unconventional shape, and I do happen to like it when an arena isn't just a simple square or circle, so that was quite nice. The main boss in this one is going to be Kakul, and a little later into the fight, Saydon will also show up, but he's mainly there in the background. He does some attacks every now and then, but Kakul is going to be your main point of focus. Flow of the fight is quite good, with some very fun mechanics. The minigame that we have in this one is also really fun, where you have one person take the role of guide, and that player then has to guide the 3 others to ads that they need to kill. You can completely circumvent this though by using screen share on Discord, for example, which does take away a bit of the fun, as the guide player just shares their screen and sits AFK in the middle of the map, but it does make the mechanic a whole lot easier. I've done both ways now, and I will say that trying to guide players is definitely a lot more fun, but you do need someone that is at least half decent at guiding the others, because otherwise it can go south really quick. As for Gate 3, the one that pretty much everyone struggled with, from what I can tell, it's mainly going to be a repeat of Gate 1's normal patterns, but with just some extra spice in them, and the main mechanic of the fight is going to be centered around the minigame, which we refer to as the Mario. Now, really cool thing for this is that they added a practice mode for the 4 minigames in Trixion, so before you get to do the raid, you can already go and practice these mechanics in Trixion until you feel very confident on them. And that's a really good thing, because failing the Mario minigame will not only kill the player inside of it, but it can potentially kill somebody outside of the minigame as well. And I already mentioned how punishing deaths are in this gate, so as you can see, it could result in wipes really easily. Deaths in general are also just more punishing, as it's essentially the same as losing 2 players instead of 1 because of the smaller party size, but in Gate 1 and 2, if your characters are strong enough, you can continue on without that player as long as you meet the DPS check. But in Gate 3, 1 death will usually result in a reset until we're overgeared enough to skip the last Mario or something. But however punishing and frustrating the gate might have been, I do like the way how the Marios were designed. You have 1 player go inside the minigame that then has to do their own thing to save a cursed player on the outside, and then the people that stay outside with the boss also have to do their own mechanic where 1 player will get jailed and then the 2 others need to make it through an obstacle course to try and free that player before they die to a saw that is slowly crawling towards them. It was really cool. The final phase was also quite refreshing, as the main focus here is going to be on doing the bingo correctly, more so than DPSing and dodging boss patterns. But this phase also goes from 0 to 100 really quickly, I felt like. I know there's a tool out there that you can use to not have to think about the mechanic at all, but that's also kind of boring. So when you're trying to do it yourself, the start always felt really easy to me, but then it gets a lot more spicy very quickly as you start to run out of space on the board, and then you still have to try and dodge the boss's attacks while trying to place the bombs, etc. So it's certainly not a victory lap, maybe with more practice, but certainly not right now. Overall, even though my first week experience was far from ideal, now that I've done my re-clears, I must say that the raid is very enjoyable. And I also think it's really nice that even if you can't clear the raid, then there is still rehearsal mode for you to go and clear and get at least the rewards from that. Although I can't really speak about how rehearsal is because I haven't done it myself yet, because when you clear normal mode, you also get the rewards that you would get from rehearsal. And I even believe that clearing normal mode locks you out from being able to do rehearsal in the first place. So that's why I haven't done it yet. But it is nice that it's there for those that either can't clear the raid because it's too difficult, or for those that just do not have the item level yet, because you do get access to rehearsal a lot earlier compared to normal mode, and it gives a lot of materials to help you gear up as well. So I think that's really cool. And then there's also the Trixion Mario training, which I think was also a great addition, just made it a lot smoother going into Gate 3, so you're not just wiping on the Mario all the time, because the player doesn't know how to do the Mario minigame. You can already practice that beforehand, it's just the mechanics themselves of the boss that you have to go and practice. Overall, good raid addition to the game from both a raiding perspective but also from a loot perspective, especially from rehearsal mode. Really like the extra materials that are being funneled into the game to use to upgrade your roster, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting to do this one more over the coming weeks. And with that, I think I've said just about everything, so I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.